Hey, Sterile Processing Universe, it's Hank Balch here with another episode of Fighting Dirty, and today we're going to start a series on count sheets, one of my favorite topics in SPD. What makes a good count sheet? And the reason this is going to be a series is because we've got a lot to talk about. There's a lot of things that go into having a high-performing count sheet, which enables your technicians to be high-performing technicians. One of the most frustrating things as a tech and a manager is being held to some standard of excellence or production. Like, how many trays should we process per hour is a common question that we have in the industry. But my first question back is, what do your count sheets look like? Because if your count sheets are trash, and there's all kinds of guessing and I don't knows going into assembling those trays, it's not fair to put any kind of productivity standard on your technicians because instructions for assembling those trays are not even complete or thorough. So before we get there, we have to have good, complete, clean, consistent, standardized count sheets. On today's episode, we're going to kick off this series talking about standard names and standard products, the most important part of this whole discussion. On your count sheets, whether you're using manual count sheets or these automated softwares out there, you must ensure that every item in your inventory, when I say item, I'm talking about a specific instrument type. Every instrument type has its own entry into the tracking system, and it's a standardized format. For instance, if you're dealing with a sponge stick or a sponge clamp, that is listed in the same or similar standard fashion as all of your other clamps. Likewise, if you're dealing with a Mayo scissor, if it says Mayo scissor on your count sheet, then when you move on to a Metzenbaum scissor, it should also say Metzenbaum scissor. However, if on your count sheet you have scissors listed in a way that says scissors, Metzenbaum, when you move on to Mayo scissors, it should say the same thing. It shouldn't say Mayo scissors on one line and then scissors, Metzenbaum on another line. Now you may be thinking, Hank, not a big deal. We can figure out if it's a scissor or not. Well, you can figure out, but each time it takes you each additional second to figure out, oh yeah, that's actually a scissor, even though I don't know where to look in all 6 of these words in the description to find, is this a scissor or is this a clamp I'm looking for? It slows down the process. And especially for newer people or newer technicians that are not as familiar with the contents of these trays. The less standardization that we have in these instrument sets, the longer it takes and the more confusing it is for technicians on all ends of the spectrum, from new technicians all the way up to experienced technicians. And we'll get to some of the reasons this also impacts those experienced folks in another release of this series. But I want to stay here on this standard nomenclature or these standard names for a little bit while longer here. In addition to having a standard layout on your count sheet for instrument names and item names, you should ensure that they're all spelled correctly and that all the grammar is the same throughout your tracking system or throughout your manual count sheet. So what do I mean by grammar? Well, let's go back to the scissors. Is it scissors, Mayo, always? Or do some of them say scissor with no S at the end, Mayo? So scissors, Mayo, scissor, Mayo, SCS, either Mayo or Metzenbaum. Are these abbreviations that are used sometimes, or are you always spelling out all of the words? This is a decision that you have to make on the front end of a tracking system or at the beginning of a discussion around manual count sheets. Whatever decision you make, it should be scaled out over the entire database. What often happens, and I'm sure most of you all have experienced this, is that you have different people come in at different times managing the database, and they all have a different idea of what the best way is to organize and to write these item names in the description. So some people like having the word scissors at the beginning. Some like it having at the end, a more natural mayo scissor. That's how it's listed. Other people like to be very, very technical and put every aspect of that instrument description, comma, 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 comma. It would look something like, it would say scissors, comma, mayo, comma, black-handled, comma, straight, comma, 7.5 inches, comma, continue on, right? So all that information is important. I'm not knocking being very specific in your count sheet. And in fact, we're going to talk about that again in another video in this series. But what is important is that whatever that structure is, whatever that grammar is on your count sheets, they must be consistent. Otherwise, you're setting yourself and your technicians up for failure because of all of the other complexity. Like surgical instruments in general are complex. There's no need for us to make it more complex by changing the way that we build these count sheets and name these items in our inventory. So it is critically important. The first consideration that you have when thinking through, are my count sheets clean, accurate, correct, and optimized, is the way that you name your instruments standardized. Is it simple? Is it easy for people to learn that system so that anytime they glance down a count sheet, all of the items, whether they're scissors or clamps or retractors or whatever it is, they all follow that standard naming convention. If you can't say that about your count sheets, stop everything else you're trying to do about optimizing your program, fixing errors with missing instruments and everything else, and go back to the very beginning and let's start cleaning up these count sheets. That's all for this kickoff introduction video for the series on count sheets. Really thank you for spending a couple of minutes of your time here thinking through these issues with me. If you've got some insight around count sheets on this topic in particular, please drop it in the comment section below or shoot me an email at hank@beyondclean.net. As I said, we're going to have a number of these videos coming up here soon, so stay tuned for more of this conversation on sterile processing count sheets. Until next time, guys, keep fighting dirty.